The penthouse was too high. That was Iris's first coherent thought. As the elevator climbed past the 42nd floor, she was literally above the life she'd just abandoned, suspended in glass and steel, and the kind of silence that only money could buy. Roman stood beside her in a charcoal suit, not looking at her. He hadn't looked at her much during the ceremony either, which had been efficient and bloodless in the judge's chambers. 30 minutes, no flowers, no witnesses except the 2 women they'd paid to sign as required. Her white silk dress was borrowed from a boutique on Madison. She'd return it Monday, cleaned and pressed, and no one would ever know it had dressed a bride. She'd worn white for the irony. "The apartment is primarily yours," Roman said, his voice carrying the flat precision of a man reading terms aloud. "I maintain offices on the 45th floor. Private elevator access is keyed to your biometric data. You won't see me unless you choose to. Unless you choose to." The words should have been reassuring. Instead, they felt like a test she was already failing, some subtext about what husbands expected, what men like him anticipated. Iris knew about anticipation. She'd spent 3 years reading the room before her former boss, Martin, walked into it, measuring the temperature of his mood by the speed of his footsteps, learning which compliments softened him and which questions made his jaw tighten dangerously. She'd married Roman to escape exactly this, the constant vigilance, the emotional archaeology required to survive near a powerful man's moods. And yet, the elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse. Full wall glass on 3 sides. Manhattan splayed beneath them like a circuit board. The Hudson caught the last of the sunset, turning the water into molten copper. A statement about wealth. "I don't need walls. I don't need curtains. I own the view." Roman moved into the space with the ease of someone who'd never felt small in his own life. "The master suite is through there." He gestured to the left, a dismissal disguised as information. "Bathroom connects both bedrooms. I'll use the secondary suite." Secondary. As if their marriage might someday graduate beyond this arrangement. As if the whole thing weren't a transaction drafted by lawyers and signed while Iris's hands shook. "Thank you for," she started, and then couldn't finish because she didn't actually know what to thank him for. For saving her job and her reputation. For paying off the settlement Martin's lawyer was demanding. For agreeing to this farce of a marriage that would make Iris difficult enough to damage a married woman, harder to entangle in scandal, easier for Roman to cut loose when he was done using her as a chess piece against Martin's company. "You're welcome," he said. And there was something strange in his voice, a crack, almost. But when she looked at him directly for maybe the second time that day, his expression was smooth as glass. "If you need anything, there's a phone. I'm having dinner brought up. You should eat." He left her there with the city and her own thundering heartbeat. Iris stood alone in the penthouse for 20 minutes. She didn't move. Movement felt like commitment, like acknowledging that this was real, that she'd actually married a stranger, that the bargain she'd struck was now legally binding. The master suite was exactly what she'd expected. Minimalist, expensive, a bed the size of a small car covered in what looked like Egyptian cotton that probably cost more than her old apartment's rent. The closet was empty except for a few coat hangers made of some dark wood that probably had a name in Italian. The bathroom was where she noticed the small detail that cracked something open in her chest. A heated towel rack already warm, towels already set out, the kind of advanced preparation that suggested Roman had planned for this. For her, in a way that felt unbearably intimate for a stranger. She locked herself in the bathroom and sat on the marble bench next to the soaking tub. That's where the panic found her. It started in her sternum, a tightness like a fist closing around her heart. Her hands went numb. The room tilted slightly. Or maybe that was just her perception, fragmenting as her nervous system decided this was the moment to remember every time Martin had locked a door. Every time she'd wanted to leave a room and couldn't. Every time she'd had to perform interest in his touch while her entire body screamed no. Her breath came in shallow clips. In, out, no, not deep enough. Again. She was hyperventilating. She knew this logically, knew she needed to slow down. But her body had stopped taking directions from her brain. The bathroom door was locked. She'd locked it, but the lock felt fragile. The kind of barrier that expensive men could override if they wanted to badly enough. She didn't hear him approach. Roman had moved through the apartment silently. Billionaires probably learned that. How to displace themselves through space without sound. How to arrive unannounced. He didn't break the door down. He knocked. A single sharp rap of knuckles on marble. Iris. Not a question. Not a demand. Just her name. Spoken the way one might say a word in another language, like he was testing how it tasted. "Open the door. She couldn't finish, couldn't tell him she was fine because she wasn't, couldn't tell him to go away because what if he did? What if he left her alone here in his penthouse? In this marriage, in this mistake. She didn't open the door. She braced her forehead against the cool marble counter and tried to remember how to breathe like a normal person instead of a small animal caught in a trap. The silence stretched. She thought maybe he'd left. Then, "I'm not coming in. I'm sitting right here, on the other side of this door." A pause. His voice dropped lower, not threatening but closer, more present. "Can you hear me?" She made a small sound of affirmation. "Count your breaths with me. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 6. You control the timing. I'm just listening." He talked her down from the panic attack like someone who'd done it before, or someone with the kind of quiet confidence that made it seem like he had. In for 4, hold, out for 6. His voice remained steady, uninflected, the vocal equivalent of a hand held out but not grabbed at. She could take it or ignore it. The choice was hers, and somehow that was what finally made her able to breathe. When her nervous system finally remembered how to function, Iris sat in the marble bathroom of a billionaire's penthouse and cried silently. Not the dramatic, cleansing kind of crying, the trapped kind, the kind that felt like drowning in place. "Better?" His voice through the door was careful, testing. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be." A pause. She heard him shift probably his back against the doorframe. "I'm going to sit here until you're ready. Take your time." And he did. For an hour, maybe more. He sat outside that bathroom door and didn't try to enter, didn't try to fix her, didn't make her feel ashamed of breaking down on her wedding night. He just stayed. When she finally emerged, Roman was sitting on the floor with his back against the wall, his jacket removed, his tie undone. His eyes were closed, but they opened immediately when she appeared, dark and unreadable as obsidian in the low light. "I'll make you feel safe," he said quietly. "I don't know how yet, but I will. That's not a promise I'm going to break." She believed him. That was the most dangerous part. She believed him, and she had no idea who Roman Ashford actually was beneath the tailored suits and the penthouse and the quiet competence. She'd married a stranger and he'd already proven to be kinder than every man who'd claimed to love her. "Okay," she whispered. The wedding announcement went out to 5,000 people via an email from Roman's PR firm. Iris learned this when her phone, which she'd silenced during a morning meeting, erupted into a swarm of notifications. She was in a conference room overlooking Central Park, preparing closing arguments for a merger that had nothing to do with her marriage and everything to do with survival. Staying sharp, staying valuable, staying employed. She stepped into the hallway and read the message. Roman Ashford, CEO and founder of Ashford Properties and Ascent Capital, and Iris Colton, corporate attorney specializing in acquisitions law, were married yesterday in an intimate ceremony. The couple plans to combine their professional expertise in forthcoming joint ventures. Intimate ceremony. She laughed, actually laughed, a sharp bark of sound that made a junior associate passing by give her a concerned look. The ceremony had been about as intimate as a root canal. The judge hadn't even known how to pronounce her middle name, but the framing was brilliant. By Sunday evening, every business publication had picked up the announcement. There were think pieces about power couples. A photo of them cropped from the judge's chambers probably appeared in 3 different articles. Roman had his hand on the small of her back. She was looking up at him with an expression that could be read as adoration, if you didn't know she'd been mentally cataloging his breathing patterns to ensure he wasn't angry about something. What no one mentioned. Martin Brennan, the CEO of Brennan Enterprises, had spent the last 6 months trying to destroy her career. The harassment had started small. Comments about her appearance, requests that she work late alone in his office, texts about problems that could have been handled via email, sent at 11 p.m., expecting responses. She documented everything in a private file, done exactly what HR training told you to do, and HR had done what HR always does, protected the company, which meant protecting the more valuable asset, which wasn't her. When she'd finally pushed back, when she'd finally told him she was uncomfortable and could they please keep things professional, he'd laughed and said she was talented but unstable, overly sensitive. Perhaps she wasn't cut out for the pressure of high-level corporate work. Then he'd started telling people she was unstable, that she'd made up harassment claims, that she was difficult, that she'd tried to seduce him, and was now claiming victimhood when he wasn't interested. By the time Roman had approached her 3 weeks ago with a proposition, marry him, it would complicate her situation, make her harder for Martin to damage, and he would pay her quite handsomely. Her options had been limited. She'd taken it. Now, watching her phone light up with a cascade of congratulations from people she barely knew, from colleagues who'd been distant since the accusations started, Iris understood what Roman had actually done. He'd made her indispensable and untouchable in a single gesture. She texted him. The announcement. Thank you. His response came within seconds. Dinner. 7 p.m. We need to discuss what comes next. The restaurant was in Tribeca, the kind of place where the lighting was dim and the wine list was a book. They had a private table in the back, of course they did. Roman probably owned the building or had some other form of ownership stake in the city that Iris couldn't quite comprehend. He was already there when she arrived, reading something on his phone. He set it aside when he saw her. Stood, like she was still someone worth standing for, and held out her chair. You look tired, he said, sitting across from her. I've been busy. People want to interview me about our relationship now. I know. Say no to all of them. The story is more powerful if we're private about it. He ordered wine without asking what she wanted, but he chose Wella White, with enough acidity to cut through the fear still lodged in her chest. I'm moving the timeline up on the Brennan acquisition. Iris set down her glass. How much up? 2 weeks. I've been positioning Ascent Capital to move on them since I found out about your situation. His company has structural weaknesses he's been hiding through aggressive accounting. Once I acquired a controlling stake, it took about 4 days to identify the rot. Roman's voice remained neutral, clinical. Your marriage to me was a side benefit, not the primary motivation. She should have felt manipulated. Instead, she felt something close to relief, because this made sense. The marriage wasn't about her specifically, wasn't about him claiming her, or wanting her on some primal level. It was a move on a chessboard. That was manageable, that she could understand. What happens to Martin? She asked. He'll have options. Quiet severance. A board position elsewhere, probably Singapore or Dubai. Somewhere far from you and from Manhattan business circles where his reputation matters. Roman took a sip of wine. In exchange, he'll sign NDAs preventing him from ever discussing his interactions with you to anyone. The story dies. And his company? I'll either fold it into Ashford Properties or sell it to someone who can manage it competently. He paused. Unless you have another preference. Iris blinked. Me? You're my wife. If you have opinions on what happens to the company that harassed you, I should probably hear them. This was strange. This was so fundamentally different from how Martin operated, how any man in power she'd encountered operated, that she wasn't sure how to respond. It felt like a test, or a trap, or maybe just decency, which she'd become so unfamiliar with that she didn't have the right neural pathways to recognize it anymore. I want to make sure his employees aren't sacrificed, she heard herself say. People who weren't part of the problem. They should have real options. Roman nodded, like this was a perfectly reasonable request, like she hadn't just made demands on his acquisition strategy. I'll add that to the transition plan. The dinner progressed. They talked business, not about them, but about his company. The current investment landscape, a property development project in Brooklyn that was facing zoning opposition. He asked her questions about corporate law and actually listened to the answers, didn't interrupt or explain back to her what she'd just explained to him. By the time dessert arrived, Iris realized something that made her stomach drop. She was comfortable. Not safe exactly. She might never feel truly safe again, but the constant vigilance was loosening slightly. She could breathe between sentences. Why are you being so nice to me? The question came out before she could filter it. Roman set down his fork. I'm not being nice. I'm being logical. You're talented and you're honest, which are rare. I'm marrying those qualities. And you're... He paused, choosing his words carefully. You've clearly been through something that left you afraid. I didn't cause that. I'm not going to exacerbate it. But you knew. When you proposed this, you knew I was vulnerable. Yes, no denial, no softening of it with apologies. I knew you needed protection more than you needed romance. I thought I could offer that. I still think I can. And after the Brennan situation is resolved, after I'm no longer useful, his expression shifted, something flickered across his face that she couldn't quite categorize. Annoyance? Offense? You're not a contract, Iris. We're married. I intend to honor that in whatever form makes sense when the dust settles. He said it like a promise. Like their marriage was already something with weight and future. Not just the temporary arrangement she'd been telling herself it was. Iris didn't respond. She couldn't. Because if she agreed that this might be real, might have the potential to become something other than a business arrangement, Then she'd have to contend with the fact that she'd started breathing differently around him. That she noticed when he moved. That his hand briefly touching her back as they left the restaurant sent a jolt of electricity through her that felt dangerous in a completely different way than Martin's attention ever had. As they left the restaurant, Roman took her coat, actually took it, held it out for her to slip her arms through. His hands briefly cupped her shoulders. The touch lasted maybe 2 seconds, but she felt it for the entire elevator ride back to the penthouse. This was the problem with choosing a protector. Eventually, she'd have to decide if she was protected by him or from him. Iris discovered Roman's library on a Sunday morning when she couldn't sleep. The penthouse at 3 a.m. was a different creature than it was during the day. The city itself seemed to breathe differently, slower, more honest. The glass walls became mirrors, reflecting the rooms back at themselves, doubling the emptiness. She'd been awake for 2 hours, her mind cycling through the same thoughts on loop. Mariagano Trial. We'll end her eventually. So she'd gotten up, pulled on the cashmere robe Roman had left hanging in her closet with a note that simply said, "For you," and wandered. The library was behind a door she'd thought was a closet. It was a room that didn't make sense in a penthouse. Rooms like this belonged in old houses with estates and family histories, not in gleaming towers above Manhattan, floor-to-ceiling shelves, a rolling ladder, a fireplace that looked real but probably wasn't, and books, hundreds of them, not the decorative kind meant to signal intelligence. These were red spines cracked, margins annotated, some with actual dog ears because Roman apparently didn't believe in bookmarks. She was reading the spines, cataloging them fiction and philosophy and business theory and biographies, when she heard him. "You can't sleep either." She spun. Roman was in the doorway wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking less like a CEO and more like a person, which was somehow more unsettling than the tailored suits. His hair was disheveled. He had a coffee mug in one hand. "I didn't know this room existed," Iris said, which was true and also a non-answer. "I use it when I can't shut my brain off." He moved past her, not close enough to invade her space, but close enough that she caught his scent. Something warm and earthy, soap or aftershave, or just the way his skin smelled at 3 a.m. "I have insomnia. Have had it since I was 20. Some people jog at 3 a.m., I read." He said it matter-of-factly, like it wasn't a vulnerability. But it was the admission that he had a breaking point, a time when his carefully controlled exterior fractured, and he couldn't pretend anymore. "What are you reading?" She gestured to the book he was holding. He looked at it like he'd forgotten he was carrying it. Bulgakov, The Master and Margarita. About the nature of power, and whether it can ever be wielded with actual morality. A pause. "I read it every couple of years. It tells me different truths depending on my mood." Iris pulled a book at random, Beloved by Toni Morrison. "This one's about trauma." "It is. One of the most important books ever written about what power can take from you." They stood in the library surrounded by all the evidence of a man who thought deeply about suffering and ethics and the systems that perpetuated inequality. And something shifted in Iris's assessment of him. He wasn't just a billionaire. He was a billionaire who was aware of the contradictions inherent in his own existence. That was different. "Can I ask you something?" Her voice came out quieter than she intended. "Anything. When I fell apart in the bathroom that first night. Had you done that before? Talked someone down from a panic attack?" Roman was quiet for a long moment. "My mother," he said finally. "Before she died. She had PTSD, complicated history I won't detail. But yes, I learned how to recognize panic and respond to it without making it worse." "How old were you?" 14. "She died when I was 16. Iris waited, but he didn't elaborate, didn't make excuses, or turn it into a tragedy narrative, just stated it as fact. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be. It's ancient history." But there was something in his eyes that suggested it wasn't ancient at all. Trauma didn't have an expiration date. She knew this intimately. "Is that why you're—" She gestured vaguely at him, at the library, at the whole carefully constructed life. "This way? Controlled? Careful not to hurt people?" "Partially." He set down his coffee, pulled down a book at random actually. She suspected he knew exactly where he was reaching, and handed it to her. It was a volume of poetry, the cover worn. "I realized something around 18. Power is inevitable if you're going to be successful. The only choice is whether you weaponize it or you mitigate it. I chose the latter. That's a very moral stance for a man who just spent 2 weeks acquiring a company through corporate espionage. It's not espionage if the financial statements are matters of public record." But he smiled, and there was something almost playful in it. "I'm not a saint, Iris. I'm someone trying to do less harm than I could. There's a difference." They ended up reading in the library until sunrise. Not together exactly, they sat in separate chairs but in the same space. He read his Bulgakov and she read poetry, and the silence between them felt different than before. Less weighted with caution. Almost companionable. Around 6 a.m., Roman got up to refill his coffee, and when he came back, he didn't sit down. He stood beside her chair for a moment, then reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was so brief, she almost didn't process it. But her body registered everything. The warmth of his hand, the callus on his thumb, from years of what writing? Tennis? Building things? The way his expression softened slightly as he looked at her. "You're not going to run," he said. It wasn't a question. "No," she agreed. "You're terrified." "Yes, good." He moved toward the door. "Fear means you're paying attention. Just don't let it convince you that everyone is Martin." He left her there with the sunrise and a copy of Mary Oliver, and Iris realized something that complicated everything. She was starting to like him, not as a savior or a means to an end. As a person, as someone whose damage paralleled her own in ways that made her want to understand him more. The wedding ring felt different on her finger suddenly. Less like a chain, and more like a choice she was making, minute by minute, to stay. The first article hit on a Tuesday. Iris was in a meeting about the Martin transition plan now being managed with military precision by Roman's legal team, when her phone buzzed with a news alert. She ignored it. Then another, and another. By the time she excused herself and checked her messages, her email was already flooded. The headline, "Roman Ashford's new wife connected to harassment scandal at Brennan Enterprises, convenient timing or corporate strategy?" The article was a masterclass in implication. It didn't explicitly state that she'd fabricated the Martin accusations, but it was written in a tone that suggested every bit of her credibility was suspect. Sources close to Brennan Enterprise suggested the harassment claims were exaggerated. Questions have been raised about whether her marriage to Ashford was designed to bolster her narrative. A lawyer quoted anonymously wondered if this constituted abuse of position through strategic marriage. It was brilliant, vicious, and probably coordinated. Martin fighting back the only way he could, by attacking her reputation before the acquisition went through. She called Roman. "I saw it," he said before she could speak. "My PR team is already drafting a response." "What response?" "We can't. I can't." She couldn't respond because she was being gaslighted in the New York Times by innuendo and strategic silence about actual facts. "People are going to assume I know what they'll assume. I also know I'm acquiring Brennan Enterprises in 4 days, and after that, the narrative changes. Because I'm going to leak every document, every email, every piece of evidence that proves Martin is guilty of exactly what he's claiming you fabricated. You'll destroy him. Yes. No hesitation, no regret. He tried to destroy you. He's trying to destroy your credibility to protect his position. I'm not going to let that happen. But the thing about being destroyed in public is that it happens in real time, regardless of vindication that might come later. By Wednesday morning, there were 43 articles. By Thursday, she had an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, comparing her to famous women who'd used accusations as professional leverage. Colleagues stopped responding to her emails. The partner who'd been mentoring her sent a message saying they'd need to pause her current assignments while things settled down. "Come home," Roman said on Thursday evening. "Leave early. Come home." She did. The penthouse felt different when she entered it, carrying the weight of public humiliation. Roman was waiting in the living room with what looked like the entire contents of a sushi restaurant spread across the coffee table. "I don't know what you like," he said. "So I got a lot of options." Iris stood in her own living room and started crying, not delicately, but in great heaving gasps that bent her double. The tears were from anger and fear and the exhaustion of fighting and the knowledge that no matter how many laws protected her, no matter how much evidence existed, she would always be the woman who'd accused her powerful boss of harassment. That was her identity now. Roman didn't try to fix it. He just sat next to her and let her break, one hand on her back, steady and present. "He's angry," Roman said when she'd cried herself into exhaustion, "because the narrative was supposed to protect him. Instead, it's protecting you. You're the sympathetic figure now, the woman attacked in the press for speaking up." He overplayed his hand. "This doesn't feel protective. This feels like drowning in slow motion. It will pass." He stood, pulled her up gently. "Come with me." He led her to his office. She'd never been in this part of the penthouse. It was exactly what she would have expected. Modern, minimalist, A desk that cost more than a car facing another wall of glass and city. But one wall was covered in photos. "That's my mother," he said, pointing to a picture of a woman with Roman's eyes. She looked tired in that photo, exhausted in a way that suggested she'd been fighting something internal. She was a social worker, helped domestic violence survivors, spent her entire life fighting systems that protected abusers. He tapped another photo. "That's me, age 8. I'm wearing a t-shirt that says, 'Ask me about my mom's job.' Didn't understand at that age that her work meant people didn't believe her, that she was exhausted by fighting systems designed to protect the guilty." He turned to face Iris directly. "I became a billionaire partly because I was smart, partly because I was ruthless, but largely because I wanted to have enough power that I could protect people like her, people like you. The system won't change, but I can use the system's rules against itself. By being ruthless. By being strategic with my ruthlessness. Yes." He took her hand. "Martin will be destroyed legally and financially. But I won't do it publicly. I'll do it quietly. The articles will shift in 2 days because I'm going to have someone leak actual evidence of his crimes to the reporters who wrote the most egregious pieces. They'll flip their narrative. He'll look like the predator he is. You'll be vindicated. And then he'll be too destroyed to hurt anyone else." It was seductive, this idea that power could be wielded on her behalf. That her violation would be avenged not through justice systems but through a billionaire's calculated intervention. "This is how you operate," she said quietly. "You don't ask permission. You move on the board and everyone else has to adjust." "Yes. And I'm supposed to be grateful." "No," he said, and there was something in his voice that sounded almost tired. "You're supposed to understand that you married someone willing to go to war for you. Whether that's a feature or a bug in the relationship is probably something we should figure out together." He released her hand, and she stood there in his office, surrounded by photographs of his dead mother and the evidence of a man trying to fix a broken system through sheer force of will. The vindication came exactly as Roman had predicted. On Saturday morning, every major publication ran with leaked evidence of Martin's behavior, not just toward her, toward a dozen women across 3 companies. Years of patterns, years of carefully concealed predation. By Sunday, Martin had resigned. By Monday, his lawyer was negotiating a settlement that included never working in corporate law again. The woman in the articles was no longer an accuser with suspect timing. She was a brave voice that had started a larger reckoning. Roman had turned her pain into a weapon, and then aimed it at the right target. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt the edge of something darker. The understanding that she'd married someone capable of this kind of orchestration. That his control was absolute. That even in protecting her, he'd removed her agency in the process. She'd escaped one powerful man's sphere only to enter another's. The difference was that this one was doing it for her, not to her. For now, that felt like enough. The property development project in Brooklyn needed boots on the ground. This was the excuse Roman gave when he informed her they'd be spending a week in a temporary office setup at the project site. In reality, Iris suspected it was strategic. Get her out of the city, away from the lingering media attention, into a space where they couldn't avoid each other. The temporary office was a renovated brownstone 3 blocks from the development site. It had 2 bedrooms, which felt like a statement about their marriage's current status. 2 bedrooms still, even after the Martin vindication. Even after the article in the Times praising Roman's company for creating workplace cultures that actually protected employees. "The master is upstairs," Roman said, setting down her bag. "You take it. I'll use the second room." It was the same arrangement as the penthouse. Separate spaces, separate beds. Iris found herself resenting this suddenly. "Why?" He paused. "Why what? Why do you keep sleeping in a different room? We're married. Most married people rushed into things without thinking about trauma response and recovery." Roman interrupted, not unkindly. "You're not most people. And I'm trying not to be the man who assumes your body is part of the contract. What if I want it to be part of the contract?" The words hung between them. Roman's expression shifted, something tightened in his jaw. "Then tell me that directly," he said quietly. "Not out of obligation. Not because you think it's what I want. Tell me what you want." The honest answer was that she didn't know. She wanted him in a way that felt terrifying. She wanted to trust him. She wanted to not want him, because wanting him meant vulnerability, meant acknowledging that this fake marriage had become complicated in the worst possible way. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "Then we wait." The week was structured around site visits and investor calls and meetings with contractors who kept using phrases like community transformation when they meant gentrification. Roman attended every meeting with the authority of someone who'd been navigating power systems since birth. Iris attended as the legal advisor, there to make sure everything was compliant and above board. During the day, they were professional. At night, the brownstone became a different kind of battlefield. The kitchen was small. When they both wanted coffee in the morning, they couldn't avoid brushing past each other. She began hyper-aware of his movements, the way he stirred his coffee counterclockwise, the slight pause when she entered a room, like he was recalibrating his presence to accommodate her. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," she said on Wednesday night. They were ostensibly reviewing contracts. In reality, they were sitting on opposite ends of a couch in the brownstone's main room, the work abandoned an hour ago in favor of just talking. "That's a dangerous request," Roman said. "Humor me." He was quiet for a long moment. "I don't think I've ever been in love. I've cared about people. I've been attracted to people. But that specific vulnerability, that willing surrender of control, I don't think I'm capable of it." It hit like a punch. "Why?" "Because love requires trusting that someone won't use your vulnerability against you. And in my experience, people always do. Eventually. I wouldn't. You might not intend to." He looked at her directly. "But intention and impact aren't the same thing. You could destroy me just by existing and not requiring what I'd offer. That's more terrifying than someone actively trying to hurt me." The confession was so raw, so exposed, that Iris felt something in her soften completely. "Your turn," he said. "Tell me something you've never told anyone." She thought about lying, about giving him something surface level. Instead, she said, "I don't know how to exist without fear. Every relationship I've ever had, I've been terrified. Terrified of saying the wrong thing. Terrified of being too needy or too independent. And the worst part is, I can recognize it as trauma response, and I still can't stop doing it." "That's actually not as tragic as you think it is," Roman said. "That's you being aware enough to change. That's the whole path forward. What if I change and you don't? Then we'll figure it out." He moved closer, not touching, just closer. "But I think we both know I'm changing. You've been changing me since you said yes to this proposal that you had every right to refuse." The air between them became charged suddenly, the kind of electricity that comes right before a storm. Iris could feel her heart rate accelerating. Her hands had gone numb. "If you're about to try to kiss me because you think it's time, I need to warn you that I might panic," she said. "I know. I might freeze up. Or cry. I know that too. I'm serious. My body might literally not cooperate. Iris." He reached out, slowly, and cupped her face in his hands. They were warm and steady. "I don't need your body to cooperate. I need you to trust me enough to try. That's all." When he kissed her, it was so gentle that it barely registered at first, his lips barely grazing hers. Like he was asking a question and waiting for her permission to continue. Her body didn't freeze. It did something worse. It remembered desire. She leaned into him, and he deepened the kiss fractionally, still careful, still asking. His hands moved from her face to the back of her neck, fingers threading through her hair. It felt like being seen, like someone was looking at her for the first time, and not asking her to be anyone other than exactly who she was, scared and traumatized and willing to try anyway. When they broke apart, her eyes were wet. "What do you need?" Roman asked against her forehead. "You to not disappear," she said. "I need to know this isn't just." "It's not," he said. "This is the beginning of something that I don't fully understand yet, but I'm not going to disappear from it." He carried her upstairs, actually carried her, which under normal circumstances would have felt possessive and wrong, but in this moment, felt like continuation. Like he was literally moving her toward the choice they were both making. In the master bedroom, under the slanted ceiling of the brownstone, Roman undressed her like she was something precious and breakable. And then, he lay beside her, and he didn't immediately push for more. They just held each other in the darkness, her head on his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. And that was enough. That was more than enough. Morning came gray and insistent through the windows. Iris woke before Roman, which allowed her the luxury of pretending to still be asleep, while she felt the weight of last night settle into her bones. They'd slept chastely, truly chastely. No sexual contact beyond the kissing and the holding, and she'd slept better than she had in years. No panic. No waking at 3 a.m. with a racing heart. She could feel him watching her while she pretended to sleep, could feel the question in that attention. Was this a mistake? Do you regret it? When she finally opened her eyes, Roman was propped up on one elbow, hair disheveled, looking less like a CEO and more like a man who'd spent the night wrestling with something. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi yourself." His voice was rough with sleep. "You didn't run. No. You didn't panic. Not yet." She smiled at her own dark humor. "Give me time." He laughed, actually laughed. A real sound that echoed in the small room and pulled her against his chest. "I have to go to a meeting," he said into her hair. "In the city. But I'll be back by dinner." "Okay. Iris." He pulled back to look at her directly. "Last night, that was me breaking a rule." "What rule?" "The one I said about keeping you safe by maintaining distance. I should have stayed in the other room. Given you more space to process." She looked at him, at this powerful man, trying to manage his own need for control by pretending it was about protecting her. "Is that really what you think? That you took advantage somehow?" "No," he admitted. "But I'm aware that I'm the stronger party here. In every dimension. Physically, financially, socially. And I don't want to become the thing I'm protecting you from." "You won't," Iris said, and meant it. "Because you're aware of it. Because you're asking." Martin never asked. He just decided that my feelings were secondary to his desires. "I'm not him." "I know. And knowing that, trusting that is the whole thing, isn't it? That's the actual relationship part." Roman kissed her forehead, then extracted himself from bed with obvious reluctance. "Stay here. Or go explore Brooklyn. Or work on the contracts. Whatever feels right," he said. "Just stay." After he left, Iris found herself alone in the brownstone in a way she'd never been before. Not isolated, not the kind of aloneness that came with fear. Just alone, with space to think. She wandered to the office area and opened her laptop. The contracts for the Brooklyn project were still there, highlighted and annotated, her legal mind already parsing the language. She'd become good at this, seeing the places where words could be weaponized, where intentions could be obscured. She was so focused on the contract language that she almost didn't notice the email. It was from a woman named Sarah Chen, CC'd to 3 other women. The subject line, "Speaking up about Roman Ashford." Iris's stomach dropped. The email detailed allegations about Roman's business practices, aggressive acquisition tactics, contracts that had ruined smaller companies, employees who'd quit because of his emotionally distant but tyrannical management style. One woman claimed he'd fired her on the spot because she'd questioned one of his decisions. It wasn't explicitly sexual, but it was damaging. And it was, Iris recognized immediately, the response to his intervention against Martin. Martin's allies had decided that if they couldn't destroy her, they'd destroy him. She called Roman. "Don't come back," she said without preamble. "What?" "There's an email. I think it's coordinated. From that Sarah Chen woman. She was an executive assistant at Brennan. She's claiming you're abusive in your business practices." There was a long silence on the other end. "Yes," Roman said finally. "I know about Sarah." "You, what?" "I fired her. 5 years ago. She was selling confidential information to competitors. When I discovered it, I gave her a choice. Resign quietly with a settlement, or I prosecute." She resigned. "She's claiming you fired her because she questioned you. That's the opposite of what happened. I fired her because she committed corporate espionage." Another pause. "But that's not how this will be framed in the press. Is it true? Any of it? The aggressive tactics? Some of it," he said quietly. "When I was younger, I didn't care about the damage my acquisitions caused. I saw ineffective companies and I saw the market correcting itself. I didn't think about the people who lost jobs. I wasn't cruel about it, but I wasn't kind either." Iris sat down heavily. "I'm different now," Roman continued. "I've built accountability measures into my company. I support employee transitions. I don't liquidate assets for profit alone. But yes, there are things in my past that, if weaponized, could make me look like a villain. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted to be the man I am now, not the man I was." She could hear the frustration in his voice. "And because if I'd led with my sins, you would have had legitimate reason to doubt me. Instead, I'm learning about them because they're being used as ammunition." She heard how cold her voice sounded, felt the distance reopening between them. "You're just like Martin. You knew this about yourself and you buried it, and I'm nothing like Martin." Martin used predatory tactics against people he was in power over, people he was supposed to protect. "I made ruthless business decisions. That's different." "Is it?" You knew there was ammunition. You knew they'd come for you because of me. And you let me walk into a relationship without full information. Would you have walked in if I'd told you? His voice was sharp now, defensive. Would you have trusted me if my opening move was a full catalog of my worst decisions? I don't know. But it wasn't your choice to make. She hung up before he could respond. The hours that followed were the worst of the week. Iris sat in the brownstone and watched the story develop in real time. First, Sarah Chen's allegations hit a tech newsletter. By afternoon, the Post had picked it up with a headline about ruthless billionaire's aggressive tactics. By evening, it was trending. The irony. She'd been vindicated by his ruthlessness against Martin, and now she was watching that same ruthlessness be used to discredit him. Roman came back at 6 p.m., when the story was in its most damaging phase. He didn't try to defend himself. He didn't even look at his phone. I should have told you, he said instead. The moment I decided we were getting married, I should have sat you down and told you everything. The fact that I didn't, that I let you discover it like this, I can't undo that. But I can be honest about why I did it. Why? Iris asked, though she already suspected. Because I knew it would change how you saw me. And I wasn't ready to be seen as anything other than the man trying to protect you. He looked exhausted, defeated. I was controlling the narrative, even within our own relationship. That's not okay. She wanted to stay angry. The anger felt safer than the alternative, which was admitting that they were both damaged people who'd married for the wrong reasons and were now discovering that the wrong reasons had maybe transformed into something real. I need to go back to the city, she said. I need to get away from this. From you. Okay. I might not come back. Okay. The acceptance is what broke her. If he'd fought her, she could have leaned into the conflict. But he didn't. He just nodded like he understood that she might leave him, and that was her right. Before she left, he caught her hand. I'm going to release a statement, he said. Full disclosure about my past acquisitions. The people who were damaged. The reforms I've implemented. It won't make the allegations go away, but it will make me harder to villainize. You'd do that? Expose yourself like that? I already exposed myself through knowing you, he said simply. The damage is done. I might as well own it. Iris left the brownstone that night not knowing if she was leaving temporarily or forever. All she knew was that Roman had finally given her the one thing she needed, a choice that was actually hers, with full information, with real consequences, with nothing hidden, and somehow that was scarier than anything that had come before. The apartment she booked was in Park Slope, 3 miles from the penthouse and a universe away. It was a sublet from a friend, small, impersonal, the kind of space that existed to be temporary, which is what Iris needed, temporary. A pause while she figured out if her marriage had ever been real, or if it had always been a transaction that had just developed more complicated layers. She didn't go to the office. She called her former mentor and told her the truth, that she'd married her billionaire client strategically, that it had worked, that she needed time to figure out what was happening to her emotionally. The mentor, Patricia, who'd been circling back into Iris's life since the Martin vindication, said something that lodged in her chest. Be careful of confusing gratitude with love. That was the thing, wasn't it? Roman had saved her. Not in a knight in shining armor way, but in a strategically brilliant way that had removed her from danger. And gratitude was easy to mistake for something deeper when someone had literally orchestrated your vindication. Roman didn't call, didn't text, didn't try to convince her to come back. But on day 3, an envelope arrived at the sublet. No name on the outside. Inside was a statement, his statement, already published on every major business publication, a full accounting of every aggressive acquisition, every displaced worker, every company he'd dismantled without regard for human cost. And alongside the acknowledgement was a new policy, implemented immediately. Ashford Properties would be establishing a $50 million fund for employees displaced by his past acquisitions. Ascent Capital was restructuring its entire ethical framework. He was stepping back from day-to-day operations and bringing in a CEO with a background in sustainable business development. It was calculated. Of course it was calculated. But it was also expensive, personally and professionally. She called him on day 4. I saw the statement, she said. I know. Your tech-savvy friend Patricia sent me the article you read about it. You're talking to Patricia about me. She called to tell me that gratitude isn't love. I told her she was right. And that I was aware I'd potentially destroyed my marriage because I wanted the security of your gratitude more than I wanted your actual choice. Iris sank onto the bed. Why are you making this so hard? What do you mean? 10. I came here to figure out if I could stay with you, and you're making it impossible by being so reasonable. If you fought me, or got angry, or tried to manipulate me back, then you'd have a clear enemy to resist, and the decision would be easier, Roman finished. I know. But I'm done making it easy for either of us. You deserve the complicated truth. And the complicated truth is that I love you. And I've handled our entire relationship with control tactics, instead of actual vulnerability. The words hit different when he finally said them. Not romantic, messy, uncertain, real in a way that made her breath catch. You can't just say that, she whispered. Why not? It's true. I've loved you since you told me that fear means you're paying attention. I've loved you through every panic attack and every moment of doubt. I've just been too afraid to say it because love means I could lose you, and I've spent my entire life avoiding that kind of exposure. This isn't fair, Iris said, but even as she said it, she knew it was. It was completely fair. It was him finally meeting her at the level of risk she'd been taking all along. Come back, he said. Not because you're grateful, not because you think you should, but because you want to. I don't know what I want. That's fine. We can figure it out together. She went back 2 days later. The penthouse was exactly as she'd left it, except Roman had removed her things from the master bedroom and moved them to his. The secondary suite was now a library expansion, a writing room with a desk facing the window, a space that had clearly been designed with her in mind. I'm not trying to do grand gestures, he said when she noticed. I'm trying to be practical. You work better with light and a view. So, it was the opposite of a grand gesture. It was the careful, specific attention of someone who'd been paying attention to her needs. That night, they actually talked. For hours. In the library, in the kitchen, making terrible coffee. Finally in bed, where they lay facing each other in the dark. I was engaged once, Roman said at one point. Before I became successful. She left me when I chose an acquisition that cost her father his company. Did you love her? I thought I did. But I think I just loved that she loved me. When I had to choose between the business and her, I chose the business. And I realized then that I was incapable of actual love, that I'd always choose power over people. And now I'm choosing you. And it terrifies me more than any acquisition ever has. Iris traced the line of his jaw in the darkness. What if you get scared and go back to control tactics? Then you tell me. And we work through it. We both have trauma. We're both going to fuck up. But I'm willing to keep showing up if you are. She kissed him then. And it was different from the other kisses. This one had something behind it other than physical attraction or careful testing. This one felt like choice. Like deciding, deliberately, and with full knowledge of the cost, to stay anyway. The next morning, Iris called Patricia and said she was ready to come back to work. Not at the same firm. She and Roman agreed that the optics were too complicated. But there were opportunities. A small firm specializing in protecting workers in corporate acquisitions. Funded partially by who else? The Ashford Foundation. It felt like collaboration instead of transaction. On her first day, Roman brought her coffee to the office and made a show of kissing her goodbye in front of the entire staff. It was performative, sure, but it was also claiming her publicly, not as a possession, but as someone he was choosing to be seen with. I don't know if this will work, Iris said one night. A week into being back at the penthouse together. Actually together. Neither do I, Roman admitted. But I know that the alternative, living separately, maintaining distance, feels worse than any risk. That's not actually a romantic answer. No, but it's an honest one. He pulled her against him. I'm going to disappoint you. You're going to disappoint me. We're both going to have moments where we revert to old patterns, but I've decided that my default is going to be honesty instead of control. That's all I can offer. It was enough. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. The scandal broke on a Saturday morning. Iris found the news alert when she reached for her phone. Ashford Properties executive alleges workplace harassment. Company distances itself from founder. Her stomach dropped. The allegation was from Elena Vasquez, VP of Operations at Ashford Properties. She was claiming that Roman had created a hostile work environment through persistent advances and had retaliated when she rejected him. The timing was impeccable, designed to erase all the goodwill his recent transparency had generated. And it was, Iris knew immediately, orchestrated by Martin's remaining allies. She didn't need to tell Roman. He already knew. When she came into the kitchen, he was sitting at the table with his laptop open, reading the statement Elena's lawyer had issued. Is it true? Iris asked. She hated herself for asking, but she had to. Because that was the deal between them now. Honesty, even when honesty hurt. No, Roman said flatly. But I understand why you'd ask. Tell me. Elena came to me 6 months ago proposing we invest in a tech startup her brother was launching. I said no. The pitch wasn't strong enough, and the numbers didn't align with our portfolio. She took it personally. Started making veiled comments about how maybe I'd have invested if she'd been more willing to collaborate. To collaborate. That's the word she used. I made it clear the decision was final, and the topic was closed. Then I moved her team under a different manager because I thought the distance would help her process the rejection professionally. But she's claiming that I made advances and retaliated when she rejected them. Yes, Roman finally looked up. She's lying, and she probably has someone willing to corroborate, which means it doesn't matter that she's lying. It only matters that the accusation exists. The unfairness of it crashed over her. That's not legal. You have documentation. I do. But this isn't about legality anymore. This is about narrative. And the narrative is that I'm a wealthy man who punishes women who refuse me. The fact that there's no evidence doesn't matter. The accusation is the news. His PR team confirmed this within the hour. Stock price was already dropping. 2 board members were calling for his resignation. One of his major investors was publicly questioning his fitness to lead. The worst part, it was working because of the exact thing that had made him sympathetic before. He'd admitted to past predatory business practices. He'd claimed to have changed. Now there was a woman saying he hadn't changed, that underneath the reformed image was the same controlling, aggressive man. We need to get ahead of this, his PR director said during an emergency meeting. We need a statement from you about Elena specifically. Deny the allegations completely. Question her credibility. No, Roman said. What? No. I'm not going to attack her character to defend myself. That's what powerful men do. I'm not doing that anymore. Then what are you doing? I'm stepping down. Immediately. I'm cooperating fully with any investigation. And I'm letting the facts speak for themselves. His legal team lost their minds. His board member started shouting about fiduciary responsibility. His PR director was practically vibrating with frustration. Roman held firm. And that's when something shifted in Iris's understanding of him. He wasn't protecting himself anymore. He was absorbing the hit, accepting that stepping down would probably cost him his company, would definitely cost him credibility, would open him up to lawsuits and speculation about guilt. He was choosing her over himself. Don't do this, Iris said that night, when they were alone in the penthouse. Don't sacrifice your company because you think it will prove something to me. I'm not doing it to prove something to you. I'm doing it because it's the right thing. If I stand and fight and destroy Elena in the process, even if I win, I become exactly what I'm trying not to be. He looked at her. You taught me that. You showed me that protecting yourself by destroying the accuser is not actually protection. It's just trading one kind of harm for another. But your company is just money. If I lose it, I've still got enough to live on. If I lose you because you can't trust that I've actually changed, then I've lost the only thing that matters. The insanity of this, a billionaire willing to tank his entire empire on principle, should have felt performative. But it didn't. It felt like someone had finally made the choice she'd been waiting for him to make. But it also terrified her, because that choice meant he was vulnerable in a way she didn't fully know how to handle. Elena's story started to unravel 3 days later. Not because of anything Roman did, but because her technical team found the financial records. Martin's shell company had been funding her legal fight. And Martin himself, it turned out, had a very specific motivation, getting revenge on Roman for the destroyed acquisition. When that information went public, Elena's credibility evaporated. She recanted the harassment allegations. Roman was vindicated. And instead of being grateful, Iris found herself furious. You could have released that information immediately, she said to Roman. You could have defended yourself and won. Yes, but you didn't. You just accepted the accusation and moved toward stepping down. Yes. Why? Because I needed to prove to you and to myself that I wouldn't do what Martin did, that I wouldn't protect myself by destroying the woman making the accusation, that I'd taken seriously the idea that my power needed to be mitigated, not weaponized. You were gambling with your company. I was gambling with my pride, Roman corrected. And I'd have made that trade every time. She wanted to tell him that this was insane, that love didn't require this kind of self-destruction, that he was still, in some fundamental way, trying to control the narrative, just with a different strategy. But underneath the anger was gratitude. and underneath the gratitude was love. And she was exhausted from feeling all of it simultaneously. "What if I'd taken the information and left anyway?" she asked quietly. "What if you'd done all this and I'd still decided our relationship was too complicated? Then I'd have done it for nothing," Roman said. "But I'd have done it anyway, because the alternative was becoming someone I don't want to be." He held out his hand to her, the way he had at the judge's chamber on their wedding day. Offering choice, offering risk. She took it. The hospital called on a Tuesday morning. Roman's father had suffered a massive heart attack. He was conscious but not stable, and they were asking if Roman wanted to be there. They'd never discussed his father. In 9 months of marriage, in all their late-night conversations and confessions, the man had never been mentioned, which meant something, though Iris wasn't sure what. "Go," she said when Roman came to find her at work. "He's your father." "He's not a good man," Roman said flatly. "He left my mother, didn't help when she was sick, ignored me for most of my childhood, then came back around when I had money. That doesn't mean you should let him die without—" "I know." Roman looked exhausted. "That's why I'm going. Not for him. For the idea of him. The father who might have been." He took her with him. The hospital was aggressively white and quiet in the way hospitals are. Roman's father was in a private room on the cardiac floor, looking smaller than Iris had expected. An old man, really. Mortal in the way that people only become mortal when they're suddenly one crisis away from ceasing to exist. "Roman," his father said when he saw him. His voice was rough. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "Neither was I," Roman said, and there was no warmth in it, no rancor either, just fact. They talked for an hour. Iris sat in the corner and tried not to listen while also absorbing every word. Roman's father apologized, a strange, formal apology that felt rehearsed, like he'd been planning this for years. Roman accepted it without agreeing to forgive it. The distinction felt important. When they left the hospital, Roman was quiet in the car. "Are you okay?" Iris asked. "I don't know. He might die. And I might feel nothing at all." "Is that heartless?" "No," Iris said. "That's just honest. You can't manufacture feelings for someone who wasn't there for you. I wanted to feel something. Some kind of redemption narrative where seeing him change things." "Redemption isn't always that cinematic," Iris said gently. That night, Roman made love to her. It wasn't the tentative, careful touching they'd started with. It was deliberate and confident and absolutely present. He paid attention to where she was breathless and where she needed gentleness. He asked every step of the way, and when she said yes, more, he delivered with the kind of control that meant she was completely safe even while surrendering completely. Afterward, lying in the darkness, she felt him trace patterns on her shoulder, some kind of ritual, some kind of claiming. "I love you," he said. "I'm not saying it to get you to stay or to make you grateful or to prove something. I'm saying it because it's true, and I'm tired of not saying true things." "I love you too," Iris whispered back, and meant it with the kind of intensity that felt dangerous and necessary in equal measure. Roman's father died 3 weeks later. Roman inherited money that he'd already rejected, a sprawling estate he'd never visited, stocks he didn't need, and a letter written in his father's shaking handwriting. "Do you want to read it?" Iris asked. "Not particularly, but I will." The letter was an apology written in the third person. Distances created, mistakes made. A request for forgiveness that felt like it was more for his father's peace of mind than for Roman's. Roman burned it after reading it once. "I don't need his words," he said. "I needed him to be different while he was alive. That's the only apology that matters." The funeral was a production, old money, old families, people who'd known Roman's father professionally, but probably not personally. Roman moved through it like a ghost, accepting condolences from people he didn't know and probably wouldn't see again. At the graveside, Iris stood next to him and realized something. He'd brought her because he wanted a witness. Not to prove anything to anyone else, but to prove to himself that this was real, that she was real, that their choice to stay together was real even when his actual family was being put in the ground. After the funeral, they went back to the penthouse. Roman was fractured in a way she'd never seen before. Not controlled, not carefully managed, just broken in the way you become when you're confronted with your own mortality through someone else's death. She held him that night. Not in a comforting way. Comfort would have been patronizing. She just held him while he absorbed the fact that he would never have the relationship he'd needed with his father, and that would have to be okay because there was no other option. "What happens now?" she asked in the morning. "I'm restructuring the company," he said quietly. "I'm bringing in new leadership." Ashford Properties and Ascent Capital will continue, but I'm going to step back further. Focus on the foundation work. The displacement fund. You don't have to do that. I know. But I want to. My whole life, I've built power because I thought I needed to protect myself. From my father, from people like him, but I've realized I don't need to protect myself anymore. Not in the way I've been trying to. From me? No. Never from you. He took her hand. From the world. From the idea that if I'm not constantly fighting, I'll lose everything. Iris understood then that this was the actual transformation, not the public statements or the policy changes. This moment where he could sit with loss and not immediately try to control the narrative around it. Marry me again, she said suddenly. What? We did it wrong the first time. We did it as a transaction. Let's do it right. Let's do it because we chose it. Roman pulled her against him. Is that a yes? Do you want to keep this marriage? Yes, she said. If you do. Every day, he said, without hesitation. They married again in the library. Just the two of them. And a judge they had to bring in because they didn't want a wedding. They wanted a commitment. He wore a suit. She wore the white dress from the first wedding, hung up and waiting like it had always been meant for this. I promise to be honest, Roman said when it was his turn. Even when honesty is harder, even when I want to protect us by controlling things, I promise to keep choosing you. Every single day. I promise to trust you, Iris said. Not blindly, but deliberately. Even when I'm scared. I promise to stay. The judge married them again. Pronounced them still married. The technicality felt irrelevant. The real marriage had been happening in the spaces between their words, in the moments where they chose vulnerability over safety. Later, alone in the penthouse, in the library where they'd first had real conversation, Roman asked her, "Do you feel safe now?" Iris thought about the question, about what safety actually meant. It wasn't the absence of fear. It was the presence of someone who saw your fear and chose to stay anyway. Yes, she said. I feel safe. And she meant it. 1 year later, Roman still woke before dawn, but instead of checking stock prices and acquisition proposals, he was writing his own strange intellectual project about power and responsibility and the ways that wealth could either calcify a person or transform them. Iris woke to find him at the desk by the window, the city still dark below them, his coffee going cold. "You're thinking too loud," she said, and he smiled that smile that was still capable of making her breathless. "Just processing something," he said, "about redemption and whether it's something you achieve or something that happens to you. What did you decide? That it's something you keep working toward, not an endpoint, not something you ever get to claim." She wrapped her arms around him from behind, rested her chin on his shoulder. They'd been together for a year now, married twice, really. Once out of crisis and once out of choice. The second marriage felt more permanent, not because the vows were different, but because they'd survived the hard part. The hard part had been learning to trust each other. "The foundation is releasing the impact report today," Roman said. "We've helped 10,000 workers transition, funded education programs for 5,000 of them. It's not redemption, but it's something. It's important," Iris said. Roman turned to face her. "So are you. That's the thing I've learned. None of this, the company, the foundation, the public redemption narrative, none of it would matter if I didn't have you. That's the actual transformation. Romantic and yet somehow still results-oriented," she teased. "I'm a billionaire. I can't help it. Everything in my world is measured in impact. Well, your impact on me is that I make terrible decisions about my future and marry powerful men after knowing them for 3 weeks. Best decision you ever made," he said, and she punched him lightly. The office they'd set up in the penthouse, hers for the small firm, his for the foundation, had become the beating heart of their shared life. She'd helped 16 women navigate harassment in their workplaces, using the legal framework he'd funded. He'd overseen the placement of 2,000 displaced workers. They rarely talked about Martin anymore. He'd disappeared into a quiet settlement, his career cremated so completely that he'd had to move out of state. The satisfaction of that was muted. Now Iris had learned that vengeance wasn't as satisfying as actual healing, but she thought about him sometimes. About how close she'd come to a life where she was quietly destroyed by proximity to power, and how instead she'd ended up married to someone who'd chosen to use his power to protect rather than to possess. "I got offered a position," she said one evening. They were making dinner together, a skill Roman had learned, specifically because Iris loved cooking, and he'd loved being near her while she did it. Partner position. Small firm in Brooklyn. specifically focused on labor rights. When do you start? I'm thinking about it. She looked at him. It would mean less time here. With you. You're supposed to take it, Roman said simply. You're supposed to have your own thing. We're not supposed to be a couple that collapses in on itself. We're supposed to be two people who chose each other and chose our own lives. Some billionaires want their wives to stay home. I'm not some billionaires. And you're not the kind of woman who stays home. We'd both be miserable if you tried. She took the job. The penthouse at night, after she'd been at the office late, became something different, a place to come together after separate days. They'd tell each other about their work. She'd explain labor law violations she was fighting. He'd talk about the foundation's challenges in actually creating sustainable change. It wasn't the cinematic romance of their early days. It was something harder earned and more valuable. A partnership. 3 months into her new job, Iris successfully won a case for 5 women who'd been sexually harassed at a tech company. The win wasn't public. They'd negotiated for confidentiality as part of the settlement. But it was real. 5 women had their lives back. Roman was at the penthouse when she came home that night, waiting with champagne. How did you? Your friend Patricia told me. Of course she did. Patricia had become a strange sort of family, someone who checked in on both of them, who'd witnessed their marriage transform from transaction to actual relationship. We did it, Iris said, and she meant the champagne toast. But she also meant the whole thing, the year, the survival, the choice they kept making. We did, Roman agreed. That night, as they lay in bed with the city lights reflecting across their skin, Roman said something he'd been building toward. I'm thinking about having a family. Iris propped herself up on her elbow. You're what? A family, children, with you. He looked uncertain for the first time in months, this man who'd conquered boardrooms and faced down his own trauma, suddenly unsure. Is that insane? Given our history, given what we've both been through. It's not insane, Iris said slowly. It's terrifying, but not insane. Because you'd want to? Because I'd want to if you genuinely want to. Not because you think it would complete something. Not because you think it's the next logical step. But because you actually want a child with me. I do, Roman said. I'm aware that I have a lot of damage. And I'm aware that my father had damage and I'm going to worry about replicating it. But I also think I could be the father I needed. I think we could. Together. Iris kissed him. And it tasted like future. Which is the only thing scarier than love, the willingness to imagine a future, and the vulnerability that requires. Okay, she said. But we do therapy first. I'm not raising a kid with someone I haven't fully processed with. He laughed. I was hoping you'd say that. The last thing that happens is the simplest thing. 6 months later, they close on a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. Not the temporary one from before an actual home. With space, with a garden, with room for a future. They're both still building. On the closing day, Iris stands in the empty kitchen and thinks about how she'd arrived at her wedding night trembling with fear, sure that she'd made the worst decision of her life. Roman appears in the doorway carrying boxes, moving things into their actual home. What are you thinking about? He asks, setting them down. That day, our first night in the penthouse, I was so afraid. And now? Now I'm still afraid sometimes, Iris says honestly, but not of you. And I'm afraid for different reasons, good reasons. Like what if we screw up raising a child? Or what if I lose you? Or what if we spend the rest of our lives figuring it out together? Roman finishes. What if that's enough? She takes his hand and leads him to the garden, small, overgrown, but potential is visible in the bones of it. That's enough, she says. And she means it. Not the cinematic, sweeping kind of meaning. The quiet, hard-won kind that comes from choosing someone every single day. From building something real with your hands and your words and your willingness to stay vulnerable. Roman pulls her close, and they stand in their empty house, in their new beginning, and she feels something she might never have felt with anyone else. Absolutely, completely safe. Not because he promised to protect her, not because he swore to never hurt her, but because he'd already proven, through every choice and every consequence, that he could be trusted with the pieces of her she thought were shattered beyond repair. And that was the only promise that ever mattered.